Hey, listeners, thanks for being with us today. Gannon and I are pumped today for a couple different reasons. Obviously, we have an awesome guest, which we'll get to here in a second. But this is also our first show that you guys will be able to log into YouTube and get to see what we look like. Yeah. The men behind the voices, which you may not listen to us after that, but that's okay. So more importantly, anyway, on to our actual show. So today, me personally, I'm thrilled to be sitting here talking to Laura Mathis. Laura is a coach, and she's really, really talented when it comes to speaking and communicating. And what I like about Laura specifically is she's worked with a lot of commercial real estate professionals throughout the years, and she's been my personal coach. She's helped me. I mean, one of the biggest, if not the biggest keynote of my entire life, Laura was the one I called, and I actually met her in a hotel lobby while she was taking a break from a keynote she was giving in order to help me out with my keynote. So anyway, Laura, thanks for being here today. Greatly appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. And you look good. Your voices match you. Not a concern there.
Well, thank you so much. So real quick, before we get started, please, shed some more light on who you are, what you specialize in, and more importantly, I want you to really convey why it's important for commercial real estate professionals to engage with someone like yourself that helps further, improve their communication. Because I think a lot of times people have the misconception that, it's only for theater, or if it's only if you're doing only a keynote presentation, when in all reality, you can kind of use these tools that we're going to be talking about today on a daily basis. So yes, if you don't mind, dive right in.
I will. Thank you so much. I'm Laura Mathis. I'm an executive communication coach with the Speech Improvement Company, and I've been coaching executive level communication for many, many years. And I think at this point, between virtual communication, written communication, the emails that you get, the in-person meetings, the conference calls, you have to stay agile with the way that you communicate. And so that's how I help people, is I make sure that they know what's the message, who's the listener, and then how to best combine those two together. We tend to communicate in the ways that are most comfortable for us, and that might not be the best choice for who you're speaking with. So I'm really happy to dive into some of those subjects today. And I think if you try to take a step back and you think, well, do I really need this? Am I going to go up on stage? And I'm not an actor or anything like that. But the fact is that you are persuading and selling and presenting all the time. And it doesn't have to be a formal setting with a lectern in a room full of people. A one-on-one meeting is a presentation. That email that you sent this morning is a written presentation. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you realize that there's so much mastery that can be done when you step away from the habits that you've had.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've had historical guests that have told us you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes.
So, and we're a firm believer in that here. So, well, great. Thanks for giving us some background on that. And really quick, if you can you give us a little, some just interesting stats on just, how often people engage with a professional coach and, how that's kind of paid off for them?
Sure. Well, in terms of stats, what we see most of the time with our clients is that they are almost always repeat clients. And what we know from that is because it doesn't matter what level you start at, you can always be better. Now, if you feel like you don't need a coach because you've read a book or you did a course 3 years ago, it's really hard, because what you're doing is you're using your work as your practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, you're using your poor clients or your colleagues or your customers as your way to practice.
I know.
And so most of the time, once someone has engaged with a good coach, that's an advocate for them. That's someone to cheer them on. That's a resource. Coaches need coaches. I mean, myself and my colleagues, we're always calling each other and saying, hey, I have this workshop. I'm not sure what to do, or how should I end it? What should be my call to action? So I don't think you're ever at a point where you feel like, and I'm done.
I know what
perfect at this.
Yes. No, you're never that way. I mean, even for me, who I've been teaching how to get over nervousness and fear of speaking for many years. And when I did my TED Talk, I was terrified. It was so stressful. And I have my 10,000 hours, right? I have all these tools. And so it's just a constant process of needing to learn and hone. And even if you don't want to, your competitors are. So if you want to stay relevant and stay agile, you have to continue with that professional development.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, I mean, as professionals in the commercial real estate industry, whether you're a landlord, a broker, a tenant, that's what we do for a living. We communicate with each other.
Yeah.
So, our mission today with this, with this show specifically for our users is really, how can you utilize a coach and certain skills through different forms of communication? So, obviously, and what we want to dive into kind of first and foremost, because we feel like this is the most impactful for our specific industry, is email, which is the most non-personal way to communicate, but yet it's the most, I would say it's not the most effective, but in a lot of ways it's the most efficient and it's the most common way to communicate in our business.
Yeah, and Clayton and I have talked about, when you say to people, we're in commercial real estate, we're brokers, developers, aspiring developers, it sounds exciting, it's dynamic, it's fast-paced, there's high-profile people, lots of money, it's fireworks, and then you walk into an office and it's really quiet and people are just typing away. Yes. And it's a lot of emails and texting and sometimes phone calls, and if you're lucky, you get to the face-to-face, really, and you can really start to exploit all of the stuff you've learned in the classes that we took with you and the training that we did with you. But up until that point, it's a lot of what you have already been coaching, which is the virtual communication, which is where we can really help some of our listeners today.
So I think, what we really wanted to kind of dive into here is we want to kind of dissect that email and kind of get your tips and tricks, if you will, on just how to structure an email, how to craft an effective, positive message, and how to utilize tones and kind of those, not necessarily visual nonverbal communication, but nonverbal communication through email. So, obviously the first thing that we do when we're marketing a property and drafting an email is the subject line. And I'm just, it's something that all of us brokers and not even brokers, not even commercial real estate people, but everybody struggles with, and as brokers and landlords trying to, pitch property to tenants, we're always trying to get that subject line that'll get their attention, So when real estate managers and small business owners are getting hit with, hundreds of sites, thousands of sites a week, what are some tips and tricks for subject lines that you've seen work historically?
Okay, here's my two-part answer to that. Very good question. The first is, don't send that email. That would be best case scenario. Just don't do it. Just walk away.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that in a second. And then the number 2 section of that would be to think of what the listener would respond to best. Most of the time, subject lines, the reasons why we hate them are they're too vague. It'll say, this Friday.
No.
But you don't read that until 3 Fridays from then, or you pull it up and you have no idea what that was referencing. And so the more specific you can be, the better. They're going to use that as a search term most of the time when you go back to conversations. Yeah. Now, that's one way to do it, is my subject lines are ridiculously concise, and I say exactly what the subject is. And here's the key, you have to change it. So if the conversation changes, and now you're talking about something completely different, you have to update that subject line. You're going to do it and be the hero, and other people won't notice it. They'll just know it's easier to communicate with you. So those are 2 really important things. The other is that you can have some fun with it. I mean, if you have any kind of relationship, and you know that they're cheering on, the Boston Bruins, you could say, Bruins are looking good this year, but ...
That's a good idea.
Right? And then you've got their attention. They're opening that email. So it can be something personal that you've discussed. Maybe you want to give them a heads up on an event they'd be interested in, not necessarily work related, a concert, anything like that. Something about their kid. If their kid was at urgent care because they broke their arm, say Tommy's cast. It doesn't really matter. You're trying to get their attention. It's like waving a flag, right?
Exactly.
And when I started by saying don't send the email, I really do mean that, because we have taken the concept of email and we have destroyed it. It's become a quick and dirty way to dump a task on someone, and there's too much of it. So most of the time at the speech improvement company, we say mind over mouse. So what that means is take a step back. I'm sure we'll talk about some tools in a minute to be able to figure out how do you craft it when you're doing it, but take a step back and think to yourself, is this the right tool for this message?
Good question.
Right?
Like the right medium?
Yes, the right medium. So you can send an email at a red light in your car. Now, is that taking into consideration the needs of the receiver? Probably not. You just wanted to check that off your list. So if you take a step back and you think, okay, what am I sharing? Should this be a phone call? A lot of times that catches people off guard. They answer because it's either their mom or someone else, so they'll answer it.
Yeah.
Should it be a text? Should it be on a different communication method that you have? Should it be a Zoom call where you can see each other face to face instead of email? So we use email as a default, and that's how it gets lost in the noise because everyone is using it. So if there's any way you can avoid sending that email and consider a different medium or a different way to share that information, tag them on a Facebook post, connect with them on Instagram. I mean, you don't have to do the same old thing to communicate, especially if that content isn't necessarily best relayed via email. And that's hard. That's reprogramming ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing a lot of Facebook messaging, and not only for, outbound prospecting to tenants, but also, property owners. And the reason I do that a lot of times is because social media allows them to click on you and get some more information about you. So to your point, I mean, it's still text. There's still that non-personal aspect of it, but at least it adds a little bit of color where they can say, hey, I'm going to click on this guy's profile, see that he actually is an active commercial real estate guy in Albuquerque, and just get some color on who I am. So
he has kids. He doesn't live with his mom. He's reputable. He's a real broker.
For sure. So, well, that's, obviously awesome tips when it comes to, crafting a good subject line. And, again, I always tell Gannon this, and one thing that I always do in my business is like, you got to figure out how to be different. Mm-hmm. And to your point, and as I've said in historical shows, in today's environment, again, with social media, with the internet, you can find out information on people and what they're interested in. Like you said, whether they're into a certain sports team or into fly fishing, or they have, they're into skiing or something like that. You can craft some type of, compelling subject line to get their attention. Yes. So definitely a good tip there. So now let's dive into, the most time consuming aspect of it. And that's the actual body of the email. And I'll go even a step further. So there's always been this argument with the salutation. And I know, I laugh too, because again, we all struggle with this. So, what is the most effective salutation? Is it okay to say hi? Is it not okay to say hi? Should I say good morning? Should I just put their name? Should I put Mr.? Is that too formal? What, and again, I know it depends on who you're addressing it to, but are there rules there, Laura, or not?
I love the idea of you just being crippled by all the choices and you write, good evening. Good day, sir.
Our motto has always been progress, not perfection. He really, gets granular with it.
This is why it takes me all day to write like 5
Clay
emails.
really wants to unpack it here.
Yes. Well, here's how I would frame this. Imagine if someone was reaching out to you, Clay, and they were selling you something or pitching you something. If they said, hi, Clay versus Clay, do you think that would impact your decision?
No. I will tell you, in my opinion, though, what would is if they put Mr. King, to me, that screams spam
Yes, you got it. So whether you say hi or hello or good morning or happy Friday, most of the time you can just stick with their name, comma, that's going to be a fail safe. But once you establish a relationship and you've had a few emails back and forth, what I always encourage people to do is mimic the way they communicate. So if they have a lot of small talk at the beginning of the emails, hey, Gannon, how was your weekend? I thought about you because I saw this and that, the other thing. And then they get into business. They probably like a little small talk before you jump right in.
That's fascinating, because that's exactly how you would teach us when we were in, face to face with people too.
Right.
So that seems to have translated to emails. Is that?
Absolutely. Yes. The way we communicate verbally in emails, it's not two different situations. So for example, if we were to take everything that we've recorded up to this point and had it transcribed, whoever did that would put in paragraphs, commas, exclamation marks. Maybe some things would be bolded. You're making it easy for the listener to read and skim it. So sometimes what happens is when you compare those two in email, it doesn't get any of the stuff it would have had if it was shared verbally, and you get that too long didn't read thing. So it doesn't matter how you started the email. You could say hi, hello, good morning, happy Monday. If what's in the body of the email is too salesy, or you can tell that it's been sent to 10,000 people, or it says good day, your last name, people aren't going to read it. And it takes half a second to make that decision. So I would say even more than worrying about the salutation is, who are they? Is this the same email you're sending to a whole bunch of people? Because you can see that and feel that right away. What are you offering them? Keeping it short, all of these things that make it easy for them to skim it. And then, within the body of the email, after it's structured, there has to be a next step, a call to action. And sometimes people feel like it's obvious, and it rarely is.
Yeah.
So what do you want to come of that email? Do they need to do something, buy something, click on something, call, take action, give a yes or no, provide a date? You want to make that as easy as possible so that if they don't read it and they just skim to the bottom, they can still process that information and not say, I'll deal with that later. And then that's it for you.
Yeah. And that's such valuable information.
Yeah, absolutely. Call to action is critical.
Well, and I'd love to, let's get to that, because I want to get to the body. So we'll cover that again in the closing of the email. But when it comes to the body of the email, okay, so moving past my paranoia with the salutation. So thank you for helping me with that. So now I'm going in, I'm typing my first paragraph, right? In your opinion, how long should a pitch email be? And is it better to use paragraphs versus bullet points, or a mixture of both? Give us your professional opinion on that.
And Clay, this just to set the stage, this is your first time intro email to a new prospective client?
So if I'm pitching a site, or whether I'm a broker or landlord, right, and I'm pitching a site, again, to a person that receives 100 sites, thousands of sites, what is the best way, in your professional opinion, to craft that body to, again, be efficient with what you're trying to communicate, and effective at the same time?
Okay. A lot of times in email, we're asking for too much. So making that step very small can be reasonable. You don't necessarily need them to sign on the dotted line or say a hard yes. Maybe it's just, can I bring you a coffee next week and just give you 10-minute overview of what we're talking about. So it's just small. If the less you have in there, the better. Bullet points are always great. Breaking it up is good. Maybe what's in the content isn't an ask, it's an offer. So especially, as Gannon said, it's the first one. Hey, I noticed you're involved in blank group. I'm also a member. Would you ever want to be a guest speaker? Right. So instead of reining back that instinct, like, I gotta land this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you can step back and say, okay, before I do that, have I established enough of a relationship? When we coach people on communication, often I'll start with a slide and it says, relationships are, and we'll ask the room, what are the pillars of a good relationship? And people will yell out their guesses. And what it boils down to is trust and communication.
Mm-hmm.
So think for a second, I know you're going to resonate with this, both of you. Think of your LinkedIn email right now and how many people spam you with DMs.
I know it.
Right? It's insane. I have so many of those. Now, are they communicating with me? Yes, it's probably pretty well written. It's got bullet points and a call to action. But do I trust them?
No.
No. So there's no relationship.
Yeah, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I mean, what you said earlier is just so true. And we struggle with, as brokers and business professionals on a daily basis, you're trying to get the most done. And there's all these little cool tools that, you can paste a person's first name and send out 100 emails and it's all the same email. I saw one yesterday where you can literally program a voicemail to go to a person's voicemail.
Wow.
And it's just, but the thing is, Laura, yeah, you can send that to 100 people, but it's still not efficient. It's the same thing you're talking about with LinkedIn. You get the DM, you don't even look at it,
right.
Because again, I'm more prone to someone writing me a DM and just saying, hey, Clayton, how are you? Because then, that would catch my attention more than, hey, Clayton, I work with so-and-so mortgage company and I would like to, blah, blah, blah. This is what we do. It's like, that's just, it seems so generic. So anyway, not to interrupt you. Continue.
No, it's good. Good. I'm glad you did. If you think of how you like to be communicated with. Like, let's say I had a boat and I had to sell this boat because I have a terrible gambling problem and I have a bookie I need to get the money to. Not that this has ever happened. So I have my boat. I'm not going to email you and give you all the specs on the boat the first time I email you. I'm going to say, hey, I was at a networking event last week again and said we should connect and that you were a great guy and that you love being on the water. I know this is sort of random, but I'm having an on the water networking event. Would you want to come out on the boat next Thursday and we'll just tool around a little and I want to learn more about what you do. And then you're on the boat and you've got a beer and it's sunny and you're feeling good. And then it comes up in conversation that I actually have to sell the boat for my sick grandmother. Mm-hmm. And so then we start talking, right? And so now there's communication, but there's trust. And it's really hard to jump the gun. Like I understand if you can send 200 emails in 30 seconds, that instinct is strong to do it. And sometimes you just have to. Yeah. But look at your response rate. Look at your return rate. If it's dismal, then what's the point? Maybe you could have spent an extra 20 minutes and done 7 phone calls and had a much better response rate. So again, it's those habits that we get into. I'm guilty of it too. But being able to be face-to-face or have that trust and communication, not just communication, is going to take it to the next level if you really want to build a relationship.
Yeah, it's quality, not quantity. I mean, that's just the truth. And quality is harder than quantity. It really is.
Well, you have to, if you're going to personalize it, it takes critical thinking, which takes energy and time and
everything else.
Yeah. But your engagement is far more, lucrative.
Yes.
Which is what you ultimately want.
Yeah.
So
yes.
I don't know. It's interesting. So if I can drill down a little bit more, and maybe there's not an exact answer to this, but so how long should an email be, Laura, in your opinion?
Well, have you ever read an email and said, I wish this email was longer?
Okay, enough said.
Right. Yeah. Shorter the better. Sometimes with PowerPoint, there's a phrase called the glance test. And what that means is, could you glance at that slide very quickly and get the gist of it? Or do you have to stare at that slide and squint and say, okay, I think they're saying the Q3 numbers were good, right? So can you just glance at it? And so I would say it's the same thing for an email. Can someone quickly look at it, understand what you're saying, what the call to action is, and what the next steps are? It takes a lot of practice to write a short email. It's very easy to write a long email because you're just data dumping on someone at that point.
Yeah.
You're leaving it to them to synthesize all that information. That's your job as the sender. You make it easy for them. And that takes a few extra minutes. But once you start to do it, you'll look back on your old emails and you'll cringe and say, oh, I sent that email to that person.
I don't know. To me, this is valuable because, just asking yourself that question. And even furthermore, when I open up an email and it's a novel, it's just like, I don't even read it.
Yeah.
It's almost like an annoyance. It's like,
well, everyone else is trying to be efficient just like you are.
Yeah. I'm not going to take, 10 minutes to go through 4 paragraphs. I think the struggle, Laura, on a personal level with me with this specific subject is a lot of times, you know, as a broker or with any property, you know, I just feel like storytelling is such an effective way to sell stuff, you know, and that's what I struggle with is sometimes you want to tell the story, but sometimes that turns into a 5-10 minute email.
And why do you think that is? You want the emotional buy-in, or you're trying to create a,
you know, or to Laura's point, I mean, there's just a lot of data that goes behind a site, you know? So it's like, to me, there's bullet points, you know, these are the facts, the benefits of a property, and then there's the story behind it as well, you know, and that's where I feel like a lot of people get sucked into, you know, drafting a long emails when you start telling the story, but, you know, I think maybe Laura, what you're saying is, you know, maybe, you know, ask to relay that story, you know, in person or on the phone, and wait to tell that full story and give them more color when you can engage with them on a different, more efficient platform. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. So I heard a great example the other day. We work a lot with biotech clients as well, and they're doing these presentations and they're trying to get $50 million, right? So these presentations are high stakes presentations.
They just look like little guys.
Yeah. And a lot of times they're scientists. So they have language, and commercial real estate is no different. You have internal language and terms and acronyms and short forms that come very quickly and easily to you. Yeah. But it might not always quickly resonate with who you're talking to. It might take them a minute if it's something that you say every day. So sometimes the phrase corporate storytelling gets a bad rep, you know, because it's hard to do well. I would even lessen the pressure and say you can do an anecdote. So like you said, Clayton, instead of just data dumping, you can say something like, you know, what's happening right now is we're the car and we don't have any brakes and we're going down the hill. So what do you do when you're in that situation? You need a mechanic. This location is the mechanic. This is what allows these two things to go together. And so all you're doing is you're just painting a picture. It's probably the same as the data, but if you can find an anecdote that works, they say, oh, I see what you're saying now. And it connects with them. And then later you can get into the details offline or in person or with a slide deck or whatever it is. So you're just looking for agreement, trust, communication along the way. You don't have to have a hard sell or commitment or yes within the first one or two interactions, because you probably wouldn't do the same with someone else.
That's a great activity to do with your team or your spouse or whatever. You know, just say, okay, I got this property. How can I, you know, paint a really, really concise, small picture that'll get their attention within a sentence?
Oh yeah, and I tend to be really wordy. I mean, I can use adjective after, and I'm like, and my wife's the one to really call me out on that. She's like, this is way too wordy. Yeah. I mean, you just need to like
cut to the chase.
Yeah, trim the fat.
Yeah, wives are really good at telling you when you need to stop talking. I'm a pro also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So now moving on to the closing of the email, right? So which you said it earlier, and we both agree. You know, this is the most important part of an email. And it's funny because, you know, it's crazy to me that more people don't take more time and understand what they're doing and how it's hurting them. Because I see emails all the time that are totally open-ended. You know, they don't have any, you know, to use your term, they don't have any call to action.
Well, and to give it more context here, so many brokers spend so much of their year, a quarter of the year or more, prepping for recon, you know, for ICSC in Vegas, the deal making session. And there's multiple deal making sessions throughout the year, but Vegas is the big one. And you're trying to get in front of as many deal makers as you can. And so how can we do that more effectively? You know, and the close, I think, is really the culmination of that.
Can you just give us give the listeners a couple examples of what you feel is a really effective closing statement? If you were, so let's do two. Let's do, if I'm pitching a property and I want you to respond. Okay. Whoops. And number two, if I'm trying to get a meeting. So let's use those two examples because I think those are the most realistic for what we do. what are two professional, examples of a good closing statement?
All right. So if you were pitching a property and you wanted someone to respond, let's go all the way to the end. What's the dream scenario email that you get back? What would that say?
Sounds great. I guess if it's ICSC, the dream, which never happens, is that sounds fantastic. I would look forward to meeting you. My time is, I'm available at 10, 11, and 12 o'clock. And my booth number is X, which literally never happens, ever. And just while I'm here, I'll go ahead and ask it because I was going to wait. But since I'm here and I use that as an example, and I don't want you to get distracted, so keep that thought.
Okay.
When you're asking for a meeting, how important is time? And what I'm saying in that relation is it more appropriate for the person that's requesting the meeting to say, hey, does 12 o'clock at your booth work? Or is it more appropriate to say, what works for your schedule?
Well, first, I love how OCD you are.
I'm realizing as I'm talking, I probably have an issue here. So.
Yeah. That's great. Time is our most precious resource. Everybody wants it. There isn't enough of it. A lot of times when I'm trying to get someone to, coach with me or learn more, I'll say, I'd like 17 minutes of your time. And in that time, here's what I'll provide for you. And it's so random. Even on the invite, it'll say 17 minutes because my time is valuable too. So I always appreciate when someone's really specific with me. Can you meet next Thursday at 2 p.m.? Because that is a strong call to action. It avoids the back and forth. But even better, I would say have 3 or 4 options. Let me know which of these 5 options works for you. Now you've made it really easy for me because I can just say, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So I don't think the specificity is bad necessarily, but I think anytime you're asking for someone's time, and you want something from them, whether it's to sign on the dotted line or come to your booth or whatever it is, do you have trust and communication at that point? Otherwise, you're on a first date and you're asking to meet the parents. It's like, okay, whoa. So I think you have to keep that in mind. It's a race for you, but not for them.
Yeah. Good tip. Mm-hmm. So back to closing statements then.
Yes.
So pitching a property, and what is the most effective call to action that I can use in order to get a response? And let me just add to that too. I'm saying just a response in general, Laura. I'm saying, just tell me yes or tell me no. As brokers and landlords, we want to hear that either way. So and then also, again, if we're trying to get a meeting, maybe we just touch that, but why don't you give us some guidance on that?
I would say take a small step first. What's a reasonable step if this was directed at you that you would do? If someone said, is it local in this imaginary situation? Are they in the same city as you?
Most of the time, not.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would say something like, hey, I'm going to send you a $5 gift card for Starbucks next week. And I'm going to send you a Zoom invite 3 weeks from now. And I'm hoping that you and I can have coffee at that time, and I'm going to set my timer for 12 minutes. Now, if you want to take that Starbucks card and never call me, I've been stood up before and I'll be okay. Right?
I love that.
So it's okay to have fun. God, we take this thing so seriously.
You know what? That would be fun. I bet you anybody would say okay to that just to give you credit for your creativity.
Right. Think of St. Jude's. There's a lot of organizations that send you those address labels, with your name on them. And then as you're ripping those off and throwing away the donation form, there's a little part of you that goes, ugh. Yeah. And then you do end up donating at some point, whether that's from that campaign or somewhere else, because there's an unspoken reciprocity there. So if you send $5 and you send this to them, I hear it gets cold in Taos this time of year. Here's a coffee on me. I'll follow up next week to learn more about how you take your coffee for when we meet in person. Right. So ease back on the hard sell and it'll accelerate on its own. You don't feel like, oh, it's going to take me 7 times longer. Well, it's going to take you 0 times longer when they don't respond to your email. So the smaller steps, the better.
And to your point, I mean, have personality, have fun.
Yes.
It's such a lost language in our business. I mean, commercial real estate's pretty rigid.
Well, humor's always been such a barrier breaker.
It's such a good tool and vehicle to get where you want to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So great tip there.
And I'll share one more thing that's one of my secret arsenal tools that I've never shared before. So here we go.
All right.
You're just so easy to talk to.
Yes.
So if I've emailed someone 5, 6, 7, 10 times and they have not responded to me, I will send an email, and in the heading, and I've tried to call them in LinkedIn, of course, I will send an email, and in the subject line it says, "Please excuse my persistence."
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say something like, "Please excuse my persistence in making sure that the speech improvement company is matching your level of interest in regards to communication training." So I'm basically saying in a really polite way, you said you wanted something and you've gone cold. Do you want it or not?
Yeah.
And I swear 9 out of 10 times I get an email back in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it always starts the same way. "No, thank you for your persistence. I'm so sorry I haven't communicated." And then I'll get an answer, yes or no or maybe. But it works every time because people see the headline and they go, "Whoa."
Yeah.
That's so much better than the headline of, "What happened to you? Are you okay?"
Yeah.
I hate
Have you fallen?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to look at my proposal? Like, I'm a loser.
Just so
Yeah. So you take the ownership, you take the power back, and you say, "Hey, I'm busy too. I mean, should we do this or not?"
That's just the truth, man.
Yes.
I mean, that's, and I've told people that, and to your point, I've seen the same success with it, is just be honest with it. Just say, forgive me for my persistence. I just want to, make sure you're taken care of, and more importantly, just get some direction on this,
Absolutely.
and let me know either way. You're not going to, piss me off or hurt my feelings or whatever.
You're not going to cry.
Exactly. I mean, So great tip though. So, well, that's awesome. That really helps me a lot when it comes to drafting emails.
What do you think about texting in the professional world these days? It seems to be another easy go-to. I'm not, personally wanting to use it as an excuse not to call, not to make the call. Again, some people prefer to text. Some of my clients, that's the best way to communicate with them. Are you, again, responding in like kind to their preferences, or what do you think about texting?
I love this subject area. I think it's very interesting. In my opinion, texting is great if the other person has said it's okay too, and you have a relationship.
Uh-huh.
If someone texts you and you've never met and they're pitching you, that's a no-go. But if it's a client or if it's someone you've been speaking with, yes, texting is so easy to do. You could get a date on the calendar in 10 seconds on a text that would take you 2 months in email.
I know it.
So, take it, and it's never a problem to ask. You can say, "I want to communicate with you in your ideal way. What's good for you? Text, phone, email, or in person, like on Zoom?" And they'll tell you. And then you put that in their file. So you've asked that question of every person you engage with, internally, colleagues, partners, everybody. And then you're always communicating in the way that they prefer, and they're going to respond quicker and more favorably. And it's just going to, we talked about, I have to send so many emails at one time and be efficient. Here's how to be efficient is match up how they prefer to communicate. And most people don't even ask.
Yeah. So question on texting. So we'll move into like kind of the phone portion of this segment, if you will.
Okay.
So as it relates to texting, what are your thoughts on emojis?
Have you narrowed down 7 emojis?
I'll give you my opinion first.
Okay.
I personally, I'm a 6'4" like Bubba country guy, right? And I love emojis. Like I and maybe it's just my generation, but to me, an emoji can speak like 10 words, So I personally use a lot of emojis, and I think it is kind of a case by case type of deal with clients. But I'm curious, in the professional communication world, speaking client to client, is that an effective way? You can even go all the way as far as GIFs, sometimes a picture says 1,000 words, an emoji can say 10 words, 100 words.
Oh, GIFs. I thought you said GIFs.
No,
like
GIFs. No, GIFs.
Yes.
So, what is your professional opinion on emojis, and are they appropriate or are they not appropriate?
Clay, I know you want me to send you the 7 approved business emojis.
Into your email.
Come on, Laura.
Laura's emoji list.
Get specific with me. I think that an image or a GIF or an emoji that is hilarious or accurate to you may not resonate with the person you're sending it to.
Yeah, good counsel.
That, again, if we want to make it listener focused, here's my informal rules. I would never send an emoji unless they had sent one first.
Okay.
And I wouldn't send anything that could possibly be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Right. So this happens all the time just in email, never mind in images and emoji. I mean, we've talked with huge companies that have had internal blow-ups over emails, and that email was 2 words. And you know what those 2 words were? Great job.
Really?
Yeah,
and
the guy reads it and says, "Great job." What the hell is that supposed to mean? Right? And so there's a problem with that communication cycle. So the same thing can happen if you're hoping that the GIF, what it means to you, means the same to them.
Yeah, comes across.
So, a relationship that's already been based can probably handle that kind of thing. That's fine. But early on, I would just be careful with that because it's not as effective as one might think every time.
Yeah. So note is that it's kind of, dangerous is a strong word, but it's a more dangerous way to communicate.
I think it is a generational thing. I think if you're a millennial like yourself, it's going to be different if you're talking to a baby boomer who's running a REIT or whatever, whatever's happening.
Yeah. So you really got to cater to who you're talking to. Yeah. Good counsel. So.
And worst case scenario, you don't use it and everything is fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, staying on, so do you have any other questions on texting?
No, more than anything, I just wanted to get her green light on it as a professional mode of communication, as long as those channels have kind of been set, in the beginning.
Yes. And I would say, to add to the texting conversation, it's nice if it's not always an ask. Mm-hmm. Right? If you knew that they were going out of town for a conference, text them on Monday and say, how'd the conference go? If you only text when you need something, that creates a negative impression around texting. You go, oh, this guy again, this girl again. So, but check in with them for other reasons too. Hey, I saw your article on LinkedIn this morning. It was so good. I shared it with my office.
Yeah.
So don't just make it asks, requests, and I need. It should be definitely 1 out of 4 is a need, and everything else is providing compliments or connections or resources or check-ins, anything to balance that out.
Yeah, because then you come across as human.
Right.
It's not just business. I try to work. I feel like I've hopefully done a pretty good job at that in my business. Is I always try to solve when I'm meeting whoever I am something that they do for fun, something personal. And to your point, if I call them, I say, "Hey, how's your son doing?"
Right.
Or did he make it through what he's going through or whatever? And it takes that. It just takes that whole effect, that whole negative effect of just being a salesman and wanting something. It's like, hey, and truly, I am a human, and I would like to know what your son, how your son's
fortunate
doing.
for you probably do care.
Yeah, I really do. I would like to know how your son's doing. You know what I mean? So it's just, I think it's just a good way to practice not only texting, just business in general. It is, again, it's a fast-paced, high-impact type of climate that we work in, and it's good to just be personal every now and then.
Absolutely.
So on phone, so pivoting off of texting, and you've been really good about this with me, and I have one of those voices that can come across as very monotone sometimes. And can you just speak to listeners a little bit about how to practice and also utilize the tone of your voice when you're talking to a prospective client? Because, again, we've all had that guy that's called us and it's like, "Hey, want to buy this?" It's like super low energy. And it's like, dude, I don't even really want to is this over yet?
Yeah.
So like, can you give us some tips and tricks on how to utilize your tone? Because again, through the phone, you don't have the same advantages you do, whether it's virtual communication through Zoom or in person. So how can you coach us on that a little bit?
Well, tone is a key indicator of emotional intelligence, and everyone's talking about EI lately, and it's rising up in terms of importance when people are hiring, because you can have the smartest person, but if she doesn't have any emotional intelligence, there's going to be a lot of clashing, and that takes up a lot of time.
And can you just speak to what is emotional intelligence to some of the listeners that may not be aware of that terminology?
Sure. So, sometimes they might call it just EQ for short. And what that means is being able to sense with self-awareness how you are communicating or coming across in situations that involve more fluid communication. So not necessarily only written, but are you able to feel the energy of the room, so to speak? Are people engaged with you? Are they confused? Are you able to take in what's happening and adapt or change your behavior based on that?
Yeah.
And it's an area that for some people is very tricky, and it doesn't come naturally to everyone. So when we look at tone and emotional intelligence, if you don't have tone that reflects the content of what you're saying, there's that disconnect there. If you've ever seen someone at a meeting say, well, the third quarter numbers were really great, I'm really excited about it.
We talk about that because on our first few episodes, we're like, hey, it's Clayton and Gannon, and we're really excited today.
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, dude, we got to spice this up a little bit.
Yes. Yes. So there's tricks that you can use to improve your tone. If you're on the phone, first of all, stand up. Because if you're on the phone and you're seated, you've probably been seated for anywhere from 20 minutes to 7 hours, because that's how we work these days. We eat at our desks. And so that energy just isn't there. And it sounds really cheesy, but if you just smile, your voice automatically is brighter and more energetic. And the third thing, and this is really hard to do, is you cannot multitask if you want to have effective tone. Are either of you guilty of doing something else when you're on the phone?
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
In
a very distracted-oriented world. I mean, all the time. Yes.
All the time. You're sending emails. You're checking texts. You're on Twitter. You're muting and eating a sandwich. I mean, it's what we do. But the person on the other end can tell. And then they start to disengage, and their tone changes. So your tone gets less energetic, and their tone does. It's this negative spiral. If you can just talk on the phone, you're going to hear so many clues. You're going to hear little sighs or or stretching out certain words, concern, excitement, all of these things if you listen, and that's going to make your conversation so much better, as opposed to I'm listening to you, but I'm also emailing and I can fake it. You go, sure, okay, right, like what you're doing with me right now. No, I'm just kidding. But we can tell. And again, we're so hyper fixed on how much can I do in the shortest amount of time, and then you're sabotaging your communication. So just try to step away. Maybe make it fun. So if you're on a phone call, you walk while you do it. Right? Step away from your computer. Don't multitask. Go outside, wander around. And once you start to do it, you'll really like it, and you'll have better conversations, and you'll remember what the heck you were talking about.
Great points.
Completely agree. So one last thing as it relates to phone, and I know, again, this isn't anyone's preference, but it's certainly a dynamic in our world, is the voicemail. How do you leave an effective voicemail when you're pitching a property? Say I have a property for sale, it's an investment property, I'm calling an investor, and I just want to call back, Laura. That's all I want. That's all I want.
I just want to be noticed.
I just want to call back. So,
they like me. They really like me.
So, I mean, is voicemail effective? And if so, what is the best way to leave a voicemail? And to kind of set the stage a little more, it's someone that you haven't talked to, you don't know, you don't have a relationship with.
Well, just like email, shorter is better. I mean, if you've ever listened to a voicemail that's too long, you'll just hang up. You'll hope something important didn't happen at the end because you're not listening to it. we have a model that I can share with you, and it's called the HEC model. And we use this model when you have 30 seconds or less to relay information. So I'll break it out for you right now, and I hope this is applicable to what you're saying. So the H is for headline. You have to start with the point. Hi, I'm Laura Mathis, and I'm calling because last week we took... Nope, you already took too long. So if you imagine the headline of a newspaper article, that's how you want to start, right? Get their attention right away. And then in terms of E, you want to try to have examples. You know, I know in the past you've mentioned an interest in blank. This is happening right now, and here's the price point. So that's just one or two examples.
You own another property in this area.
Or another property, whatever it is that you'd been communicating with them. And then at the end, you have to figure out what's your comment, what's your perspective, what's your opinion. Based on what you've shared, you and I need to move on this before Friday.
Yeah. Again,
done.
Yeah.
Right? So headline, example, and then comment, HEC. And
Awesome.
this has to be done in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Even 30 seconds is kind of a long voicemail.
Yeah.
You could probably get that down to 15 if you just have one example.
Yep. And to that point, I think it's important if you are going to be calling somebody to have that lined up before you make the call. Otherwise, you're fumbling all over yourself.
That's right. Especially if you were in the middle of writing an email because you know the voicemail was going to click on. So your brain said, oh, you've got 7 seconds. Start that email.
Yes.
So yes, then it's going to be a terrible voicemail. I mean, an alternative would be check your response rate for voicemails. So if they're not that good, don't leave one.
Yeah.
Send an email that says, I tried you on your line, I didn't get you, and then just email them.
Yeah, and some of these phone calls, there's large commissionable events attached to the back end of these things. Give it the respect it's due,
Exactly.
you know?
Well,
right.
Again, you know, not to give you a plug, but this is why you hire people like Laura, because they help. No, seriously. I mean, this is the importance behind it, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
that could be a $60,000, $100,000 plus
lifelong
commission.
client.
You know, and people don't invest or take the time to really be the most effective at it. It's just crazy to me. You know?
So instead of sending the voicemail, you get together with your colleagues and you say, let's brainstorm 40 things we could do other than leaving a voicemail. Because I can't think of a situation where I was left a voicemail from someone selling me something or pitching me something, and I said, yes, I will call them back. Yeah. It's almost never. I have no sense of obligation.
That's what I really struggle with is, it's like, I don't even know if voicemail is effective. I mean, you know, as a broker and landlords are always like, well, who have you cold called? And it's like, you know, cold calling is, I just don't know how I feel about it. I mean, you know, it's like almost you got to do it, but I just don't know how effective it is, because the vast majority of the time you get sent to voicemail. And it's like, is voicemail even effective? You know, so I feel like that's why I asked this question. I feel like it's so important to our industry and people listening to this podcast, because it really is a dynamic that we have to put up with in our industry, because a lot of times you don't get to speak to the person the first time you call. You know?
Yes.
So.
I'll share a really funny story that I just heard 2 days ago from Jeffrey Gitomer, who's a big sales guru, and he was talking about voicemail and emails. And he said that instead of leaving the same old voicemail for someone you've been trying to send a proposal to get them to look at it, he says, get your kid to leave a voicemail and write the script and have them say, hi, my mom sent you a proposal 3 months ago and she's been calling and she says you haven't returned her calls. I looked at it. It looks pretty good to me. And now mommy says I won't be able to go to college. And that's it. Right. And he says they will call you back. They will send it to all their people they work with and they will call you back. And
lucky for you have a perfect age employee at home.
So we need to rent out your child, Clay.
No big deal. He needs to
put them to work. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's so funny. I love that idea.
Well, and again, it's funny and it's using humor as a vehicle in order to get a reaction. I mean, it's just such an effective tool. So that's a great tip. So, and I know I said that was the last one, but I thought of one while we were talking. So can this same platform be used, because this is the other thing, okay? Ring, ring, ring. Hello. What do you say right out of the gate in order to not come across as salesman-y? You know, and naturally as a salesman, broker, landlord, you want to say, hey, this is Clayton King. I'm with Base 5 Retail. How are you doing? Awkward silence.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm good. I mean, is that the, I mean, just please give us some intel and some direction on that. And I don't know, how do you do it?
Probably pretty close to what you just said.
So, I mean, is that, please just help us here.
Okay, these are good questions. It's awkward, and there are ways to make it less awkward. First, I would encourage you to not say, how are you today?
I know.
What the person is thinking is, oh God, kill me.
Yep, I know.
Right? Here's this guy calling me. It's 2:00. I was about to do it's just a bad feeling. And people don't like being messed with. They don't like being strung along. And because we know time is so precious, I would just start with the point. I would say, I know you're busy. I'm going to say this in 20 seconds. And then you just say whatever it is, right? Keep it short and succinct. You can use the headline, the HEC process if you want to. Just make it really short and then get a small next step. You don't expect to have a conversation on the spot.
Yeah.
That's craziness. No one can do that. Yeah. But you could say, let's find a time to talk in the next 3 weeks and we'll block off 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that they could say, okay, yeah, fine.
Yeah, and I think this all kind of boils back down to the point that you had said before. You know, we're not asking to get married on the first call or first.
Right.
We're just looking for the next evolution in the relationship, whatever that's going to be.
Yes, and you can't really do that small talk until you know them. Hey, how's your Friday going? You know, how are you this Monday morning? They're not in the mood because you don't have a relationship yet, and they feel frustrated when you do that. So you don't have to pretend like you want to care either. You just get right to the point.
Well, and the other one is always, you know, ring, ring, hello. Oh, is this Tony? You know, and it's like, I mean, I hear people do all the time. And as soon as I hear someone says, is this Clayton? I'm like, I know this is like a sales call.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm frustrated I picked it up. You know?
And you regret picking up that phone because then you have to listen to them. But at least if it's short, it's not that long, right? If you can do it in 20 seconds and you're not asking for a lot, that's reasonable. And cold calling is hard, but it can be effective. A lot more than one of 70 emails that they get before lunch.
Yeah, sure. Well, and like I said, maybe, you know, I mean, I think I just need coaching on that. I need Laura.
Well, there's just so much good information here. Laura, is there anything, I mean, we want to be respectful of your time, obviously, and we're so grateful that you could be here with us today. Is there anything that you would say or recommend that we haven't asked yet?
Well, I've had the pleasure of working with folks in commercial real estate, and I know how much you communicate. I know how a lot of those presentations are really high stakes. I mean, there's a lot of dollars on the line. There's a lot of work that goes into conversations that you have. And my biggest suggestion would just to be very intentional about what you say when you say it. So it's not about what would be best for you. It's what information do they need? What do they already know? How can I support them? Who would they love to be connected to, right? Yeah. And so when you switch that awareness that, oh, it's not about me, it's about them, then you can do things like, hey, I sent you a $5 gift card for coffee, hoping we can do it over Zoom in 3 weeks, but if not, it's okay, I'll be all right, right? So instead of just bombarding them and covering your own agenda, really be listener focused. I've seen people in commercial real estate have just really effortless, flawless communication, but then there'll be one area that's a habit, like a data dump in an email or leaving 3-minute voicemail messages or whatever it is, because that's just what they do and that's a habit. So you really just want to take a step back from all communication, verbal, video, written, text, and make sure it's focused on the listener as a first step.
So would it be fair to say prepare for your presentation, whether it be written, email, in person? Just prepare and know your audience?
I would say prepare is a good first step, but then also just be willing to be present in that moment. If you're having a conference call and they can't see you, don't write an email. If you're on the phone with someone, don't text.
Yeah.
All of these things can be heard and felt on the other end. And if you're trying to establish communication and trust, which we know are the pillars of a good relationship, you're not going to be able to get away with that without a disconnect.
Yeah.
So you can prepare, but sometimes you don't have that luxury.
Yeah. And really quick, Laura, since this is what you specialize in, is there a creative, so like we've been hearing some chatter in our industry on alternative ways to communicate and get that attention. And one example is like, these video email platforms, for example, or Zoom, right? Do you feel like those are effective ways to be different in our industry? And like, more importantly, how many people are actually utilizing these type of platforms these days? I mean, is it, I guess, if I said, hey, can we do a Zoom meeting? Or if I do send an email, do you think it's a differentiator? Do you think I'll get a higher return rate based on using this type of communication?
Based on what I've seen, the younger the recipient, the more likely they are to utilize video talk or LinkedIn messages. You can send a voice message via LinkedIn now. If you're younger, you're more likely to use those. If you were to send a Zoom link to someone, let's say over 55, and then Zoom goes to download on their computer that first time, they might go, "Whoa," right? Not because, they're not intelligent people, but it's not something that's part of their daily life.
Yeah.
And so I try to be careful when I navigate that. If someone communicates with me via text, I will back, but I would never initiate that first or without asking. So whether it's Zoom, I love Zoom. I love being able to see people. If you had to rank it in terms of how effective it is, face-to-face, video face-to-face, phone, email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that's the ranking. We all default to email because it's quick and dirty. But is it the most effective use of your time if there's someone that would love to do a Zoom call with you?
Right.
And then you can see each other. You can check for their gestures and their body language.
Yeah.
You can watch them checking their phone and say, I need to let you go. You've got a busy day. So do I. You're getting these cues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would take advantage of it if it makes sense. And you might want to have a handful of options. You could say, I'm comfortable on all forms of communication, but would you prefer a Zoom video call, or should I call you? Or should I text you?
That's exactly.
And a lot of these freelancers that we have been using to help build the podcast, they're in Nigeria, Spain, the Netherlands, New Delhi, India, and we get on Skype, and for free, I'm looking at the guy talking to him, which is great.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's always best if you can see each other, if the other person is also comfortable. It's not your job to teach them how great Zoom is.
Yeah.
If that's not for them, then maybe that little $5 gift card will be what resonates with them.
Yep. Well, again, this has been invaluable.
Yeah, and Laura, we'll put all your information and contact stuff in the show notes, but just for our listeners who may be traveling while they're listening, what's the best place for people to go to learn more about you?
Sure. Well, my company is called the Speech Improvement Company. That's the website. They've been around for 55 years. They're considered the oldest coaching firm in the nation. And we are on 4 continents. So no matter where you live, we will come to you. We travel globally. And then I'm on all the usual suspects: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I put a lot of stuff on Instagram that I cook. So if you're into that kind of thing, check it out. I also have public speaking tips on there, of course.
Okay.
But I would love to connect with anyone that's listening. And if any questions come up that I didn't answer, shoot the 3 of us a message and we can do a follow-up post attached to this and answer any questions.
That's great. Great idea.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Of
Certainly
course.
hope, and I'm sure our listeners will utilize this. So, and we know your time's valuable. So thanks again for being here. And with that, we're wrapping it up.
Thanks, Laura.
All right.
Talk
Thanks
to you
so
soon.
much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Laura.